Well, welcome everybody to Totum Realty Advisors podcast number 9. I've had a little bit of a break since number 8, but we are excited to get back into it. And the current event is not this, but we're going to start with Michael's fashion statements over the last 2 days. Today, he just told us that his shirt is in...
It's a tribute.
It's a tribute to Prince.
Prince.
A musical genius, by the way. It's little raindrops on the shirt. That's the design. And it's purple rain.
And what was it yesterday?
In a vacuum, that would not be a big deal. But yesterday, he had a tribute to Arnold Palmer, which was...
The shirt had little lemonade glasses and the umbrella from Latrobe, golf balls.
What is the umbrella from Latrobe?
That's the logo for Latrobe Country Club.
Oh, okay.
And that was the logo Arnold Palmer put on all those shirts.
And then
was the umbrella.
The umbrella is also a staple at Bay Hill. As well.
He designed that, right?
Yeah.
Correct? Mm-hmm.
And the Arnold Palmer Invitational.
Learn something new every day.
There you go.
So how about that? Podcast today starts with current events in the fashion world.
Michael Castle, fashion icon.
Yes. But what is the real current event that has your...
The real one or the one we're going to talk about?
Either
the
one
one we're going to talk about.
But the one we're going to talk about as it relates to real estate.
Yes. So everybody is on the edge of their seat due to our friends at the Fed increasing the interest rates. So that was, I don't know if it was 3 weeks ago now or 2 when that actually went into effect. But it was a 3/4 point hike, which is the largest interest rate increase that we have seen in this country in about 30 years. I think 1994 was the last interest rate of that size. So everyone is, I probably have conversations a couple times a week in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks with people asking, what's the market doing now? What's the market doing now? So everyone wants to talk about inflation and now the rising interest rates trying to combat that inflation or curb that inflation. So I thought today we could talk a little bit about how this interest rate increase or interest rate increases in general can impact the lending atmosphere and therefore the activity we see in the commercial real estate market. I also thought it would be interesting to maybe tie that into investment real estate in particular, because people still have money and they still need to put it somewhere. And so does the interest rate increase impact investment lending, and to what degree, more or less than normal lending?
So is this today's podcast or
yes,
a series
we just got to talk fast.
Or a series for the next calendar year?
No, so we have to talk fast. So
so we need to figure out a way how to bite-size it, right? How to turn it into little mini questions.
Well, the answer to your first question is yes, interest rates do affect the lending capacity of a bank.
Right.
And who can qualify for a loan and debt service coverages, and it will have a dramatic effect on smaller players investing in real estate. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I'm actually, the reason that this is kind of front and center in my brain is that we're working with a client right now who was under contract for a building a month and a half ago, terminated that contract, and now is under contract on, or going to be under contract on a different building, but obviously different loan applications, a month and a half, 2 months apart, and now he's facing a pretty substantial jump in interest rate. And
what kind of jump? Let's be specific.
I actually
100%?
No, I think a percentage point.
Right, but I think that it was from like 3 3/4, so 3.75% into the 5s, which is almost 50% increase, maybe a little bit more. So substantial. It's not just that it was 3/4 of a point or 1/4 of a point in the grand total of his loan cost. It's more than 50%.
Okay, explain
It's a game
that.
changer.
Explain that.
explain.
What changes the whole dynamic of the loan.
Right.
Specifically is the money that he is borrowing from a bank it costs more. So
Right.
basically,
Let's
To
use round
quote-
numbers. Let's say his loan was for $100,000, and if his interest rate was for deal one, the one that he terminated, was 3.75%, then he on his $100,000 had $3,750 of interest on an annualized basis. That exact same loan, I think you said a month and a half later, if he's now at 5%, which is 1.25% higher, is now $5,000 of interest, which is roughly 50% more, a little bit less than 50% more in total costs to him annualized.
Yeah, it's definitely less than 50%.
Well, 50% on 3.75 is another 1,600 and change, so it's close to 50% increased in cost. And that's only a $100,000 loan. His loan's going to be,
$650.
so let's just say $700,000. So it's multiplied that by 7.
so his coverage ratio, the amount of money that he has to produce to actually qualify for that loan, probably went up. Now the loan is not, so he's either have to put more equity down to keep his interest rates and payment back the same, or he's going to have to take out less money. And if he
Yeah.
takes out less money, that means he has to put more of his own money into it.
Right.
So it does change, and it's not just like, 1 point is this, but the changes are exponential.
Yeah, and if we even simplify it further down to your friends who are asking both about your business and career in industry, but they're also probably thinking about their own personal, what's the cost of my mortgage and my house going to be? I mean, in less than 6 months, the cost of a 30-year mortgage has gone from, in round numbers, 3% to 6%. That is a 100% increase in cost. And even as I sit here today, I mean, we were looking at potentially moving. We did not refinance at the end of 2021
Rough.
because it didn't make a whole lot of sense, because there is costs to refinancing. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense to refinance if we were going to move. But now we have decided not to move, and we didn't refinance, and we have something that I know you wanted to ask about called an ARM, which is an adjustable rate mortgage. So it happens even to the best of them. So.
Yeah, so that with the client that I was talking to about terminating one contract, now about to go under contract on another property, the new loan is now an adjustable rate mortgage. I guess because of the volatility of the market, lenders are using that to kind of hedge their risk maybe. So he was able to get a lower rate up front. So I actually think his rate up front for the adjustable rate mortgage, I believe it was in the low to mid fours.
Okay, so he didn't have that immediate jump.
Right.
Right?
But then after 10 year, and he gets a 10-year initial term. So it's a slightly lower rate, locked in at a 10-year term, but then after that 10 years, it flexes with the market. But what I don't understand, and maybe you're proof of it, is if you're coming up on the end of the fixed portion of your interest rate for the initial period of an adjustable rate mortgage, and the market's crazy and the interest rates are super high, why don't people just refinance? I'm curious as to how many people actually take out an adjustable rate mortgage and see that mortgage through to the end and expose themselves to the risk due to the volatility of interest rate fluctuation.
Well, very few mortgages actually go from cradle to grave. Okay, usually at some point in time you've either sold the property or you have refinanced the property or something of that nature. But, the whole idea of an ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage, is to have that lower cost in the front. And if interest rates remain low, so interest rates have been low for the past, 10 years?
Even
At least.
more.
possibly
20?
even more than that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they've been as low as they have, but typically the interest rates for money have been sub 5 numbers. So, and recently they've been even lower than that. There's been no reason to do that because the index that they use to adjust the mortgage is always low. So the ARM only works against you when interest rates are volatile and they go much higher.
And depending on what type of ARM product you use,
Also the term.
in the term, you've got the ability to protect against quick changes. Like the ARM that we have, which is not expiring yet, so we still have the protection. Even when it loses its quote ARM feature, it still has the maximum change of like 2 percentage points every 3 years. So it's not as if, if interest rates tripled tomorrow, it would not impact us.
Yeah, but I guess I don't understand why banks still offer that as a product, knowing that if rates do go higher, people can just refinance to get out of it. But I guess they'd be refinancing at a time where it's higher, so that doesn't happen as much as one would
Refinancing
think.
at a time where it's higher, and also recognizing that most people are asleep at the switch and forget about it. And then when they go to refinancing, the fees associated with refinancing, coupled with potentially the equity they have to put into the investment, makes it very difficult for them. So the banks are doing it to create an opportunity to extract capital.
And for most of the banks, the bank that you took the mortgage out with, they don't own the mortgage. They've sold
Yeah,
the
I
mortgage
understand
5 or
that.
6 times down the road.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess what was not making sense to me before was the realization that if you get to the end of your locked in rate and interest rates are super high, interest rates would be super high for you to refinance anyways. So it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
And
Okay.
a lot of people who have an adjustable rate mortgage are only paying interest. So in your example about this client, I'm not sure if that's the case, but if they're only paying interest and they've not paid down any principal, and there's been no appreciation in the home or the investment, then to my previous point, they would actually have to come to the table to refinance with more capital, because now the terms of borrowing have changed. So not only did interest rates go up, but the amount, as Michael said, the debt coverage ratio, so the amount of the loan that you can get for the same value has also changed. So if you've only paid interest rates rose, your ARM's up, and the value of the house or the investment did not increase, you would then be coming to the table again
And you need the 30 or
with equity.
yeah,
You'd
20
have
to
to bring-
30% equity for the loan to value.
You'd
The
have to
difference
bring
between what you put in originally.
A certain amount.
Yeah.
You would have to do that. And then the ARM is just one of the various financial products that a bank will have to lend money.
Yeah,
There
that's definitely another podcast.
No, it is, but that's the whole thing, is they're trying to fit in there. And when you talked about you're not paying any interest on it, in some cases, if your ARM was low enough and had a small enough window initially, you could actually have negative amortization, whereas you're adding loan amount based on the fact that your interest rate was so small in the front end of the loan.
Right.
And then the other part of an ARM, a 10-year ARM, that's a long financial instrument. Usually ARMs
Yeah, it might
adjust
be
every
7.
year. Seven
be
is
7.
even 7 is long. Typically they're going to have adjustments every year for. I'm talking about a typical, let's just say a residential mortgage, that have adjustments every year for a period of 3 years, and the swings. If you have 2% bumps, in your case you have a 3-year window.
Mm-hmm.
So your rate is assured that it's not going up any more than 6% in the space of 9 years. That's a pretty decent protection. Some of them don't afford you that kind of protection. So they can be a really, really tough instrument.
Yeah, so let's shift that from current event discussion to real estate application and talk a little bit about how that increase in interest rate is impacting commercial real estate from a owner, user, or occupant perspective.
Both is the simple answer.
No, but I mean, so rather than or talk about it as how it's going to impact that scenario versus investment activity, real estate investment activity. Like, do you see this curbing the appetite for people looking to invest in real estate?
Definitely curbing the values of the investments in real estate. And I would say the larger the value, the more impact that this most recent change has, and the future changes will have, because this change was not a one-time. This was 3 changes in a row, coupled by soon more to come.
The forecast is there are going to be 8 changes.
Yeah.
And we're already 3 into them.
Right. So 100% it impacts value. And the larger the value, the more impactful small changes make. I mean, if the loan's $100,000 and it increases by 0.75%, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. If the loan's $1 million, starts to get pretty impactful. If the loan's $10 million, and you just keep adding a zero. You know, I would say, as we sit here today on June 29th, 2022, transactions north of $100 million of loan value are seriously impacted, if not frozen, by what is going on in the valuation game between where interest rates were 90 days ago and where they're at today.
But again, the guy who has a lot of money, the guy who is very credit positive, now liquid, he has his own capital that he can deploy, because now the return on his own capital is going to be in line with whatever he'd have to pay for his debt. So it changes the whole focus of how you would invest in something. Should I use somebody else's money or should I use my own money?
So earlier on in my career at Totum, I mean, before I started working in commercial real estate, I always thought the goal was to be debt-free. And then we had a very great, like one of our Kevin Riley whiteboard sessions during a Tuesday morning meeting. And you pointed out that to be appropriately leveraged is the most ideal scenario, because then the money that you have, say you have $1 million to invest, you can split up your $1 million across multiple assets rather than buying one asset outright. So your money is working harder for you in that scenario. So
in round numbers, you could have multiplied that by 5. You could have invested $5 million instead of
levered it. So now I'm not buying $1 million worth of real estate with $1 million in cash.
Right.
Now I'm buying $2 million or $3 million of real estate with $1 million in cash, and I'm using somebody else's money to cover for it. And if that money, the cost of that money is inexpensive, better for me. So, if the cost of that money became expensive, worse for me.
Right. So do you think that the increasing interest rates now, do you think that that's going to spur more all cash buyers still investing in real estate, or do you think it's going to shy people away from investing in real estate and maybe push them towards other places to put their capital? Like if you put money into stocks, that's not requiring you to take out a loan at 6% interest. So do you think that that will deter people from investing in real estate?
I think it will change the way that they invest in real estate. I think that people will look for more value. I think people will look for, there'll just be a little bit more scrutinous, and there's going to be a lot less purchasers, because there's a lot of people that purchase real estate that do rely on leverage and have become addicted to very low interest rates. So now I'd say half the purchasers that would normally be in the market are no longer going to be there. So there's going to be a number of different unique alternatives or unique opportunities. So those particular investors that are all cash buyers, they might be a little bit more scrutinous on what it is that they're buying. And maybe they can say, no, I'm not ready to buy this yet, and wait for the prices to go down. And the prices will go down. If I'm that $1 million building, and I have $1 million worth of debt on this, and unfortunately my loan came through, or I had to refinance, and I have an interest rate hit, And I was waiting till I got this really long-term tenant before I went back to the bank, and I just mistimed the market. Well, now I have a tenant that is a fixed revenue stream for the next 10 years, though my cost with no control that I had have gone up exponentially. My property is worth less because it costs more for me to own it. And so that lease that I thought was going to be a great lease and a great investment
Because it took too long, it negatively impacted.
It's not that it took too long, it's just things changed during the course of this.
Well, the timing of it happened to
the timing did not
fall
work.
after the interest rate increase. So how does
But it doesn't make it bad real estate. It just means that it's bad real estate for the person who paid X for it.
So now the guy who has he paid X for it.
Or that it's less profitable than it once was.
For that
it's
guy.
It's less profitable for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So now it costs me more to own this. I'm much more motivated to sell it because this for the next 10 years is going to bleed me dry.
But you could sell it to someone who could take advantage of that extended term.
At a lower valuation.
At a lower valuation.
Or with more equity and less debt.
More equity, less debt. They are right-sized. And now the guy who wants to re-leverage it, he can no longer re-leverage his property because the rates are so much higher.
Unless he has equity.
Unless he has equity.
And pays down debt.
And then that takes out his other equity.
Same tenant's rent could still cover the debt. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't have any equity or any partners to go to and ask for equity, then he's in a pickle. It's called being upside down.
Yeah, but he also, even if he has to put more equity in it, that's less of a return than he was expecting. Because now he had
promised to his investors.
He had promised to investors. So you're going to have that kind of volatility and that kind of dynamic. So I think that's probably going to be good for the market. It's going to be bad for the guy who owns the property, but it's going to be good for the market.
But make no mistake about it, there is still billions, if not trillions of dollars out there looking to invest in real estate because real estate is a very inflationary, safe place to invest versus the stock market. And those people, all they're doing right now is resetting their valuations and resetting their debt to equity relationship. Meaning if they were getting mortgages at 80% of value, now they might be getting mortgages at 65%. They still exist out there. There's still lots of transactions happening. That's, I think, to your point when your friends asked the question, like, oh my gosh, is the sky falling in? Is nothing happening? And no, I mean, disruption at the end of the day is a really good thing for the commercial real estate market.
All real estate markets.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So do you think, we work with some people who are big fans of the 1031 exchange, which is a tax deferment. You can take capital gain. I'm going to probably explain this poorly, but you can take your capital gains from the sale of one asset, and without paying the tax on those capital gains, you can flip it into another investment within a certain time frame.
Mm-hmm. You can defer the payment.
Defer the payment if you invest your capital gain from the sale of the first asset into another one.
Yep.
What's the time frame? A year?
I think you have 45 days to identify it, and you have 6 months or a year to close. I'm not 100% positive of it, but it's the play is I'm not paying the government today.
Yeah.
You're going to
Are
pay
those
them,
people
just not today.
shitting their pants right now?
No.
Which people?
No.
The people who have participated in 1031 exchanges and have maybe sold off smaller assets, flipped those proceeds into a larger asset, and now they're facing, it all depends on how long you hold the asset, but now they're facing the potential of, oh God, I want to retire and I want to be done with this in the next 5 years, and I'm looking at potentially 8 interest rate increases in the next year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, that are all 3/4 of a point each. And then when I get out of this, that could very fundamentally change someone's...
It really depends on when your time frame's kicked in.
Right.
It could be, okay, so if I have, I'm looking to sell this property, and the guy I'm going to sell it to, maybe he's not going to get his loan because of the changes in the dynamics of the lending market. Yeah, now I'm in trouble because I've obligated myself to buy something else. Not that you have to go ahead and buy it, but it kind of screwed up how you were looking at your whole tax world.
Yeah, but even still, say you're in an investment that you were thinking you were just going to do kind of like a value add flip. So you sold off a couple smaller properties, flipped it into a 80,000 square foot property, and you were going to lease it up and then sell that in the next 3 years. That's not a great position to be in, correct?
That is not a great position.
Yeah,
to
but
be
you
in.
might have to hold it longer. It might change. You do a tax-free exchange not based on interest rates. You do it based on deferment of taxes.
Right, but we work with so many people who do that serially.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they take one thing, they add value, they flip out of it, flip it into a new investment, add value, flip out of it, flip into something else.
But all that changes in the 1031 world is it just might prolong when they can flip into the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't caused them to have to pay taxes. It just has caused them to maybe not realize growth in the next asset for a period of time.
Or they would have to hold it for longer than they intended to hold it in order to let the market stabilize.
They're going to have to be a little bit more cautious about what their investment opportunities are, but it's the same type of thing. Let's just say if they have a heavily leveraged property that they're selling, they're not in a good position. Anybody who's heavily leveraged is not in a good position. Anybody who has right-sized or less than right-sized leverage, you're probably in a pretty good position.
As long as you don't plan to sell it in the next several years before interest rates come back down. Because if you sell it and realize those capital gains while interest rates are so high, or is it different rates? I don't know. Our capital gains tax is different than interest. So it's that's what I'm missing.
They're not related, and
so one doesn't impact the other in any
one
way.
Doesn't impact. Now, if you were going to sell a property that was, let's say you had $1 million worth of capital gains, or you sold a property for $1 million, all you're required to do is buy another like-kind property for $1,001. But if you sold a property for $1 million and you leverage yourself into a $10 million property, you might be facing some difficult times, but then that goes back to the capital stack that you're dealing with.
Got it.
So,
yeah, I don't know why. I was just assuming that capital gains tax would be impacted somehow by that. But I guess it's just all about the debt servicing expense and not really
because
impact you when you sell it.
You don't experience the capital gains tax until you sell.
Right.
So all that's doing is reducing your profit if you have to pay the tax.
In my mind, I was just thinking that was going to go up as well, and people would get hit with a much higher
taxes always go
tax when they do flip out of it.
That's one thing that's consistent is taxes go up. So your assumption is accurate in the long run that if you've had to defer your sale because of interest rates, by the time you go to sell, capital gains also could have increased. Potentially. It's not that they would have increased in that period of time. They will increase over time, but it's a timing game.
And that's not something that's impacted by inflation or rising interest rates.
Until the
government decides that
they need
now
to raise
we're going to raise your capital gains.
Right.
Capital gains, I'm going to get this wrong, but the idea was right. There was a time, it was during George the Son's administration, where he had lowered capital gains, and they went down to, I don't know, maybe it went down to 10% or decreased every 10 years or something like that, or every year during a 10-year window, and then they went back up to the 20%. The most recent increase in capital gains has come from the Obamacare tax. Over a certain amount of money, if you sold that, your taxes went up. I think it's 3.5% or 3.75%. So right now, if you sold property, for the most part, for capital gains, you should be looking at 23.75% is of your gain is what would be taxed. That's what you would be deferring if you were reinvesting it.
And does that percentage, is it like with your income tax bracket where that percentage increases or decreases depending on your net worth or income or anything?
Capital gains.
So it's just fixed across the board, whether it's a $70,000 cash out of like a retirement account or a Well, we're not
I
a regular
don't know
retirement
what
account's a bad example.
Yeah.
Stocks
Yeah, yeah,
or
but stocks.
Long-term capital gains. So anything that fits into the IRS's bucket of long-term capital gains,
Which is anything over a year, correct?
is taxed at X.
23 point whatever percent for everyone across the board.
No, it's taxed at 20%, and then over a certain amount of money, I believe it's a gain of $250,000. I'm probably wrong about that, but anything over that amount gets an additional 3 3/4 tax, and I could be wrong about the quarter part of it, that is used to support the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
That was but that's all within capital gains. Short-term capital gains are taxed at your standard income level.
Depending on where you're at in the
Got it.
The food chain.
Well, that was a
Or
really
how big your
long rabbit
taxes
hole.
are.
But just to rewind the tape really quick, back to like tenant representation or landlord representation. How does this change the leasing landscape when you consider a 60,000 square foot or any amount of square foot office user that is now moving into a space and wanting the landlord to build it out? And how do that is this new, the increasing interest rates are obviously going to come back to the tenant as a planned expense for the landlord in a build out, correct?
Not in the form of a build-up, but in the form of a lease structure, yes. If you wanted to do short-term leases, you would be putting yourself at risk based on interest rate rises. So by having long-term leases that, let's say, had fixed, controlled escalations, you wouldn't subject yourself to, well, this is going to be my cost at market. Okay, your increased rate. So if, let's say, you're paying $20 and you have a 2% increase to your rent fixed, or you have no increase, you have it flat for 5 years, the landlord is at risk if he has interest rate risk. So his costs, even though nothing changed in the building, could easily be going up, and that would change his posture when it comes time for him to renew a lease with you. Mm-hmm. If you have a lease that's for $20 a foot, and then at your renewal, it states in the lease, we'll just negotiate the extension. His motivation is to get as much as humanly possible because his costs have gone up. And if you wanted to stay there, you're kind of at risk.
Right.
Do you think it'll impact a landlord's willingness to amortize build-outs over the term of a lease?
Yeah, because their cost of capital is increased.
Their cost of capital is increased, absolutely.
And you used a 60,000 square foot tenant example. That's a big tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Probably has a really good balance sheet. Probably has the ability to borrow money or use cash at a really low rate compared to landlords who typically are highly levered and their cost of capital is high. So yes, the relationship between who's paying for the tenant work right now is absolutely changing as we speak.
Is my money cheaper than yours?
And that's really what it boils down to. And we should do a whole podcast just about that.
Yeah, because that's a fascinating thing, because some people require a huge return on their capital. Some people have a little bit more patient money, and that might be a way of skinning the cat.
Yeah, I mean, tenants that we've worked with sometimes will be like, well, we want the landlord to pay for it as a tenant improvement allowance because it's their money. I'm like, well, it's their money that they're borrowing from somebody else, charging interest, and then passing it through to you in the form of rent. And if their cost of capital in today's world is 5%, but you have cash on hand, or you could borrow at 2 or 3% because you're a really well capitalized tenant, you might want to do the tenant improvement works with your money, get a reduced rental rate, and not be succumbed to the landlord's, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, fairly high cost of capital.
Yeah, if you can get 3% money to do improvements and he's charging you 10%, you're going to use your money because over the evaluation of it, it's going to be less expensive.
Yeah, and historically, I mean, even throughout most of my career, I have seen, a fair rate for a landlord to charge for tenant improvement dollars is somewhere between like 4 and 6%, because they were borrowing money at 2 or 3%, so you let them make a little bit of an increase, right? But if they're borrowing money at 5 or 6%, it's not going to be passed through to the tenant.
Okay, Paige, this is where I talk about being old.
Yes, this is where
Let's
old
do
comes
it.
in.
Okay, when I got into the real estate business, okay, my first residential mortgage was at 13%. And I can remember interest rates in the 18 plus range. I can remember inflation in the 20% range.
Was that when they just invented credit and so they did?
Yeah,
Jesus, Paige.
yeah.
That's
when
exactly what it was.
Men started to walk upright, I think. Maybe it was like, I don't know, maybe they were still
The Federal
crouched.
Reserve just got started.
Yeah. No.
13%?
18.
18%. 18%.
That's
It's
a credit
coming.
card.
Pardon?
That's a credit card. That's a credit card interest rate.
In your lifetime.
In my
Yes.
lifetime.
Yeah,
yes.
in your lifetime. But this is
That's
something that was
wild.
done. No, that's just the way it was. And that changed the dynamic of how things happened too. But no, it occurred. We actually had companies that would, they were interim financial companies that would finance tenant improvements. They would offer different loan structures so that the landlord did not have to take it on. They'd take a second position in the building. Yeah, it was just an interesting time because things cost a lot of money to build, and you had to be creative about how you approached it. There was a lot of owner financing of sales.
Do you think we'll start to see more of that with this
I think
increase? Or do you think there's more mechanisms now to...
No, I think anytime that you have a volatility, someone's going to come up with a different way of looking at it. And a lot of times the different way is what used to be done. So I
That's
think that you'll
interesting.
see people that make decisions based on what does that mean to me?
So the other takeaway from this, for me personally, is maybe I should just still get a car because it's just going to get worse. Is that what we're saying?
I think it's going to get worse.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
But like for a long time, do we think?
Well, what's a long time?
Like more than 2 years.
So we're going to end the podcast with Paige's car buying decision.
Should I buy a car now or wait? There's going to be a poll in the comments section.
Yes,
Please
we're going to do a poll in the comment section. Well, here's what I know. I think it has everything to do with what kind of car you want. And I'm going to use 2 examples. This has nothing to do with real estate. How did we get on this topic?
Yeah, that was just me being...
You can go to GMC right now today and buy a brand new car, if your credit score allows, with 0% interest fixed for 60 months.
That's wild. So you told me about that a couple months ago.
And
You think
didn't
that's still a
listen to
thing?
me.
Do you think
it's
that's
still a thing
thing?
right now? Promise. Guaranteed.
God, I really like
Okay?
GMCs. Yeah.
They are giving away cars.
But
Giving away cars.
nobody is giving away anything.
Hold on. Let me finish.
Oh, please, I apologize.
On the other side of the equation, you've got the brand new Ford F-150 Lightning that if you bought it today for $80,000, you could sell it tomorrow for $110,000 plus or minus. So what kind of car do you want to buy will dictate the outcome of the poll and whether or not interest rates have anything to do with your choice.
Do you cook?
I do.
You ever make a cake?
Yeah.
You know
That's
all the
baking,
ingredients.
but yes.
Yeah, no, you know all the ingredients.
Cooking, baking, whatever.
All the ingredients, they get baked in the cake. The same as cars. Okay? The interest rate, should you choose to use the 0% finance, the car is more expensive. Should you buy the car directly, there is a discount that's attached to it. That's the way it always works. It's just done. It's a financial game, like you say, a mechanism, an instrument. However, that's how they finance the car, and that's how they move the lot off the inventory. So, yes, it goes back to what is your budget? What fits into you? What are you spending on the car now? What is the new car going to give you? Does it make sense to do it? Does it fit into your lifestyle? Is that something that you can see down the road? How much is your existing vehicle going to devalue between now and the time that you own the car? All that stuff goes into the whole mix.
Right.
We have officially switched from current events real estate
To self-help for Paige.
self-guidance for car buying
Love
for
it.
Paige. It is a wrap.
This is Paige's therapy corner and
The
life
answer
guidance.
This
is-
isn't therapy. This is
No.
No.
Well, the
Life
next one
guidance.
can be.
No.
Big old episode 10. We gotta.
But to bring this
Something new.
kind of
HGB,
full
turn off the
circle,
cameras.
I think the thing that's most interesting about the real estate interest rates is this has not stopped. In your window of 2 years, I think that's a safe number because 2 years will be the new change in administration. Something's going to happen. Whether Joe Biden continues to keep his position as president or someone else replaces him, on either side, someone will change monetary policy.
That is a given.
That is
Right.
an absolute given. But that won't occur for 2 years. So the Federal Reserve has said the way we're going to try to attack inflation, and like you said, inflation is bad. It's been worse, but it is bad. And for
Yeah.
your lifetime, this is as bad as it has ever been.
Well, yeah, when you have a global pandemic and inject trillions of dollars into
For whatever,
the
for whatever
economy,
reason we talk
shit's
about
gonna
this,
happen.
yes,
Right.
yes, I think they're stopping everybody from working for 2 years, and then all of a sudden giving everybody as much money as humanly possible, and not stopping the printer pressings.
I feel like they could have given me more money, to be honest. But
Yeah, that would have been
That's
good
it.
for some people.
Yeah,
but not
let's-
so much for the inflationary.
Okay, rabbit
Oh,
hole, rabbit
right.
hole.
All right.
Okay,
Well-
but there is that he has said, the head of the Fed has said, I am going to fight this by trying to raise interest rates. And again, we're at mid 5, 6, let's just say residential rate, depending on what index that you're using as how they're measuring the interest rate. Okay, it's going up. And I think it's going to get to easily into the +7, possibly +8 range within the next year. Now that's the Michael Castle crystal ball. Okay, so if you think that this has changed today, wait till tomorrow. Because every day you wake up, gas is just as expensive. The cost of food is just as expensive, and it continues to go up. And I think one of the things that, now this is my tin hat thing, I don't think they're telling you the real numbers. You go to the store and you see the real numbers every day. So interest rates are going to go up because that's the only tool that the Fed has right now to fight inflation. And inflation, for those reasons, we have a supply chain crisis, we have a war going on, we have them flooding the economy with money. We have a lot of turmoil in this country right now. Interest rates are going to be affected by that, and they are going to go up even more than that.
Right.
So,
Well, really quickly,
Oh,
I mean, I
oh
am
my gosh,
fascinated by
come
this,
on.
and this is a good
can't
life
believe I
learning
wasn't
thing.
even done.
This is a good life learning thing that does have implications. Obviously, we've talked about in real estate, but a scenario that I'm curious about is so the Fed uses interest rate increases to offset or to try to curb inflation, with the thought that they increase the interest rates, less people will spend money, and they'll start to like tamper down on the amount of money being injected into the economy.
And if there's less demand, then the supply will
Prices will go
increase
down.
and prices will go down.
But what if people just keep spending? What if the heathens like me are like, hey, anything could happen. Let's just keep taking out loans.
This
Let's
is
just...
why-
You mean because that's something you've never done or ever had to deal with in your entire life? Yeah, that's a possibility.
it's a possibility and it's real. And that's why interest rates
It's
are going to keep going up.
extremely real, and they're going to continue to go up. But let's go back
That's interesting.
like 3 years. One of the reasons we have inflation is because the Feds didn't raise interest rates. They kept the interest rates the same so that growth would still continue to occur, and they didn't have that kind of governor. That's a real, symbiotic connection with your interest rates and your inflation.
But then they pump trillions of dollars
And
into
they
the
pump
economy.
$1 trillion.
People start spending it.
You have
demand
that
goes
one
up.
event there, and now, and this is, the best economists in the world are going to sit down and have the same conversation.
They have no clue.
And never come to any kind of consensus here. But the point being that having seen it a couple of times, all right, it's going to occur, it's going to go up, and that's going to create even more volatility. And more volatility just means get people who can think downstream, get people to help you, get counsel to help you that will say, okay, this is what you should be considering. Because just like you just trying to decide, do I buy this car? someone is eventually going to go into your office and start putting this thing down on paper and say, if you do this, this will happen. Okay, if you do this and this happens, this will happen.
Yeah, I would like someone to come in my office and do that for me right now.
Well, offline, we're going to do that with you.
Great.
My vote is you should buy the car. What's your vote?
I don't have enough information.
Okay.
I've
Okay,
heard
well,
too
we'll
many
work
things.
on it.
The crowd can vote, for
I
sure.
would love it.
And at the end of the day, Michael, I thought you wrapped that up perfectly. Our clients can count on understanding how this stuff impacts them.
Because it will impact you. And
Yep.
if you think that it's everyone's got to deal with it, someone is going to come up being a winner, and someone, unfortunately, is going to be on the other side of the equation.
Right.
And that's the important part, because it has happened before, and it's happened a bunch of times. This is, when they say it's cyclical, it's because people continue to screw it up.
Well, we're still here. We're proud of it. And we're excited about the next wave. Winner or loser, Pikesville.
I did not like it.
Oh, I can't say anything bad against Uncle Clifford. This is another Heaven Hill product. This is a straight white rye whiskey. And no,
Could
this
someone
is
please send this to Heaven Hill? Oh my gosh! All right,
It's like something clicks in his personality and he
unbelievable.
becomes Vanna White.
Vanna White.
All right,
folks.
Prince.
Thanks for Prince, Hidden Hill, and Inflation
Heaven
by
Hill.
Michael
And this happens
Castle.
to be a Peter Millar shirt, if that anyone's giving endorsements here.
Have
Are you
a great
clamoring
day.
for sponsorships over here?
We'll see you on episode 10.
Thank you.